So in case you don't know me at all, I'm Sascha Bates. I'm from Minnesota. And I have a little bit of a web presence. I have a blog where I say things with opinions. I also bootstrapped the Twin Cities, the Minneapolis Infracoders meetup basically a couple of months ago. And I also podcast with some release engineers. And that's kind of fun. And you can find me on Twitter if you want. Why am I qualified to talk to you? I have been in love with configuration management since I met it in 2010. Before that, I had been doing several years of consulting where I did a lot of building of infrastructure by hand, writing scripts, and trying to get dev teams to use them. And that never worked well. And then I would move on because I was consulting and pretty sure that everything would crumble as soon as I left. And so when I met configuration management stuff in 2010, I was just like, where have you been all my life? And why haven't I ever heard of this before? And why isn't everybody using it? And so that's kind of where I was at then. And also, what I have found over the years is that I've worked on a lot of different areas in systems, whether it's ops or infrastructure or building things. And I've even done time on dev teams and things. And what I really find is that one of my favorite things is working in conjunction with dev teams to help them get going with their apps, figuring out why they can't go or how they need to configure them or what's going to make them work best in production, that sort of thing. And so really, I like to think of myself as a curator for developer happiness in a lot of ways. So that's kind of why I think I'm qualified to tell you things here about this stuff. Today, I kind of want to share some of the things that I've learned in the last 3 or 4 years with configuration management. Things that I've done badly, things that I've discovered, hopefully things that you can shortcut after I tell you about them. So, full disclosure, I just started working for Ops Code about 8 weeks ago. It's no big secret that I like Chef. Chef is my configuration management tool of choice. I've used a couple of others, and it's what I prefer. And you would have heard that long before I ever started working for Ops Code. And that's the thing, though, and that's what I have to say about tools, basically, is that a tool is just a tool. It doesn't matter what you use. I think it's important for you to use something these days with the scale that we're trying to drive to, a lot of us. There's just no way for you to get away with handcrafting servers anymore or trying to cope with handcrafted servers getting handed to you. And so really, it doesn't really, if you came here expecting me to maybe talk about different tools, I think you're going to be disappointed because it's not really the tool itself, it's what you do with it that matters. And most of these tools are going to do a lot of the same things. Their implementations will vary a little bit, but in general, they're all the same as far as what we're going to talk about today. They have a lot of the same implementation types and the same styles. And for me, I want you to use one. And we can argue about it offline over a beer, which one is best. But here, I'm not going to do that. So why am I here? I like to dive into things. I don't read the manual. I'm very bad at first attempts. I never ask for directions. I just like to take a use case and dive in head first and figure out what I can. And that's pretty dangerous. It almost never goes well for me. But it's fun, and it's interesting. And so, you know, I think that we might have some things to talk about today based on some of the stuff that I have done. I have some really great code examples at the end that are just truly horrific that I wrote when I first started doing this. So I guess one of the first things I want to do is start talking about configuration management, what it is, and why you might want it. So it used to be, and it might still be actually for some of you, it took a long time to get a dev server. And you might be sharing it with lots of people. And there might be 30 versions of the app running on it so that everybody could have their own little dev space. And you might all be connecting to the same database server, right? And so now one of the things that we're trying to do is get past that. But in the meantime, other things that I'm sure have never happened to you, but sadly have happened to me in my life. Wrong database connection string information goes to production. All of a sudden, it's trying to call dev, and nothing works, and everybody's in a panic, right? The app gets deployed with the wrong SMTP settings. Somebody goes in, fixes it by hand, and forgets that they did that. And then the next time you deploy the app, the same thing happens. Your test Apache server has some funky settings that nobody understands how to set up, and the guy who did it doesn't work here anymore. And all of a sudden, you're building new servers for whatever reason, right? I sat next to a team trying to figure this out when we were migrating from a base ATG setup to JBoss several years ago, and it took them like 2 weeks to get this app working in test. 2 weeks. Push in SSH keys by hand. These can get lost, overwritten. Somebody has to know which ones need to go out to what servers, depending on whether or not you have batch files that care about this stuff, or even why are you pushing SSH keys in the first place like this, right? But this kind of stuff happens all the time in your infrastructure for a lot of places. These things can all be controlled by configuration management and made safe, or non-issues, depending on which one you're talking about, right? So let's talk about a little bit what we want to really define configuration management here. And just say that right now it defines and idempotently enforces system state across your infrastructure components. That means, the short story, you can run something 10 times, it will configure it right the first time, and then it will stop trying to configure it again. So it has built-in checks for everything that it's trying to do. So if you have a package installed, it will say, oh, hey, look, this package is installed. I don't need to try and do that again. That's one of the really great things about these tools, is that they all have this built in to the point where you don't have to worry about that anymore. All you have to do is tell it to use the package manager for your OS and install the package, and it's good. So, and the other thing too is that configuration management is automation, and you'll hear me use them interchangeably quite a bit. It doesn't encompass all of automation, but it really is, and so I too tend to fall into automation this, automate that, configuration management this, just because automation is easier to say a lot of the time. So what else? Configuration management, automation, it's freedom, right? It's there to remove the uncertainty and chance from your life. You want to be able to deploy your app in a way that makes sense to you, that's the same everywhere. It should be giving you certainty. It shouldn't make you feel like you're being tied down, like you're being forced to do something that's horrible, right? It's supposed to give you a level of certainty about what you're doing. It's supposed to give you confidence. Right? It's supposed to let you know that whenever you build a new system, it's going to look just like the system next to it if that's what it's supposed to do. If you've got 50 app servers and you need 51, your 51st app server is configured exactly the same as the other 50 next to it, and you don't have to worry about that. It should take you 10 minutes to provision a server once you have it in the data center, less if it's virtual, right? So, I mean, these are the kind of things that you want to think about. You don't want to, it's easy to feel sometimes oppressed by this stuff because it's new, and it can be hard, especially if it's not your primary focus, right? If you're trying to get code done, writing configuration management code it can be a hardship. And the thing to remember is that it's there to make things easier for you in the long run, even if it's a little harder in the short run. What it's not, though, configuration management, it's not going to save you all by itself. It's not magic. It's a framework, right? All of them are frameworks. And so if you think that it's going to come in and make everything work, and it's going to create your new world order for you and make everybody happy and work together, it's not. It's just a framework. You still have to understand how to use it. It can't make decisions for you. You have to make the decisions. It just makes them easier to implement. So it's really important to understand that. There's no DevOps magic coming in with these tools. You got to make your own magic. It just makes it easier to make the magic, really. And if you don't remember that, you could be hanging out with these guys instead. So I want to ask you guys a question. I'm not going to do too many of these because people think they're dumb, and I don't really like them either myself, but I kind of want to know what you think, who I'm talking to, where you're at with this stuff, because I've worked with a lot of devs, and some of them love this, and some of them rage at me, because all they want to do is write their Java code, not write their configuration management code. So let's talk about where you might be. So this is people who haven't really heard of it, don't really know what to do with it, want to get somebody else to do it for them, maybe. Raise your hand. That's good. I don't see any hands. What about, are you in a place that's trying to do it and you just want nothing to do with it? Really? Nobody? Really? Well, we can all go home. Let's just go to the bar. I got nothing to tell you guys. You're all happy and ready to go. All right. So where do we start, though? I mean, if you really are not sure where to start. What should we do? Where do we go? We really don't know because there's a lot of stuff to do. And these tools are complicated, right? I mean, if you sit down with Chef, if you sit down with Puppet, CF Engine, Ansible, any of these guys, right? They're complicated. They have a lot of documentation. There's a lot of code examples out there. There's a blog post for every day of the year for the last 4 years, probably, for every one of them. And some of them are very contradictory. So what do you do? Where do you start? So what I want to talk about with you guys today, I'm going to do a little infrastructure review for anybody who, I want to talk about why you should care about infrastructure if you're a dev, and some basic expectations you should have and be working towards with your configuration management. I want to talk about getting started, what you need to think about both when you're wide open and when you need to work on legacy systems. What do you do? And then we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about all of the things that tools need in order to work in concert together, because your configuration management tool can't live by itself. I mean, it's a great tool, but there's all kinds of other stuff out there that it needs to exist and work well. And then we'll have some practical code examples at the end, and I actually have a Vagrant VM that we can pop up and try that I should probably kick off about halfway through here, because it takes about 6 minutes or so to run. So, and it may or may not work because it's live. It worked in my hotel room. But who knows, right? So then next, infrastructure, who cares? You care. You should care a lot. Infrastructure is where your app lives. It's the baby incubator. The baby goes there and it never comes out. You should care about this stuff. And I know it's hard, especially in times gone by, because there's just these guys in charge of your stuff and you don't know anything about it. And a lot of times, your dev and your test environments have nothing to do with production. Nothing. And you can't see production, and you don't know what's there. And so you get to this point where you're just like, whatever. I can't see it. I don't know what's there. I can't help anything. I'm just going to deploy my app and pray, right? And so you need to care about this stuff, and configuration management is going to make it easier for you, because once you start doing this, and once you start working towards provisioning everything the same everywhere, you can see everything because it's going to be in source control. You can see how they're provisioning, how they're bootstrapping, how they want you to build stuff, what's going into the configs and things like that. And you should be provisioning everything everywhere the same. And so it should help you with that. So in a perfect universe, this is my perfect universe infrastructure that we want to work towards. You want to provision everything the same. I want my Vagrant box, I want my dev VM, I want my 51 prod servers all provisioned the same. I want them all to have the same bootstrap. I want to know what's going to go into them, and I want to be able to reproduce it on my laptop, in my dev environment, and wherever else I need to be. And I want other people to be able to take my app and reproduce it in their environment too, because our apps, of course, these days don't live by themselves. They integrate with each other. And it would be really nice for that other dev team over there to be able to pop up my app so that they can test against it. And we can only do that if we're provisioning identically everywhere. So then next, we want it's so often the case that there's the production deployment process, and then there's everything else, right? You just never know. Deployments are complicated. They've got all these things. They've got all these moving parts. They've got databases. They've got app upgrades. They've got connection pooling. They've got all kinds of things that you need to worry about. And it just makes it worse when dev deploys one way. And I mean, not just one way, but like some dude, your release engineer, maybe wrote the script for dev, but the ops team wrote it for production, and it has nothing to do with anything that you do in lower environments. I mean, this is a problem, and this happens a lot, especially the bigger the company, the more likely this use case is going to be. And so what you really want to work towards is the idea that you have one deployment process, and you want it to be the same everywhere. I mean, if you have to, start by researching what's happening in production and seeing if you can reproduce it in dev. And that's hard because you have to actually talk to the ops guys, right? And sometimes it can be hard to get the information, but if you're doing all of this anyway, it gets easier. So again, in my perfect universe, we have repositories for everything. If you've got an RPM, if you've got a deb, it's in a repo. It's not on your web server somewhere. It's not out on the dev server somewhere. It's in a custom repo where you can pull it with a package manager. I did a really big, long rant about this at ChefConf, and I think I wrote about 6,000 words on my blog about this, so I'm not going to belabor it too much. You should have them. They're very important. You should want them. We don't make changes to servers by hand anymore, if we can avoid it. It never completely goes away, but you really want to work towards this idea that all the stuff that we do is done with configuration management code someplace else. And then we can push that in via the clients. The less changes, the fewer changes that we do by hand, the happier we're all going to be, because then it's all going to be in source code and people are going to know. And you won't get things like, Sascha, there was this thing, it was broken, so I fixed it. But now it's broken again. Help, right? And so that's what happens. We want to change things less by hand and more with code. So getting started, what are we going to do? What can we make with configuration management, right? There's all kinds of stuff that we can make that people may or may not have thought of. This is the big thing, right? Server provisioning. This is what people think of most of the time when you're talking about this stuff. It's making servers so that they're the same everywhere. Provisioning is really the last place we think to formalize this too. So a lot of times it's a kickstart file somewhere on a server somewhere that has like 30 backups with funny names, right? It's just a kickstart file that's been changed for the last 3 years as needed. And it's generally bad, and it generally requires a lot of SSH fixes after we've bootstrapped our machines. So with server provisioning, this is like your big win. People think of this a lot because generally this is the last place we've done anything, and there's a lot of stuff that can be done to make things more stable in this area. But server provisioning, not the only thing that we can do. App layer configs, right? Keep your configuration data separate from your app. Why should you have to rebuild your EAR file because the database password changed? And if you're in a place that has PCI or other compliance, you can't put the database password in your EAR file because you can't know it, which means the apps guys have to do it somehow. How are they doing that? They're probably going into the servers after you've deployed and changing it. This hurts me. This hurts me a lot to even think about it. And so if you can actually keep your data outside your EAR file, outside your WAR file, outside your Ruby files, because they don't have anything like that, but it makes it a lot easier. You shouldn't have to recompile your code because configs change. You really shouldn't. There are ways to do that. There are ways to keep them in Chef. There are ways to keep them in Puppet. There are ways to keep them in all the other tools. Or there are other ways to also keep them in external databases and pull them in via the config tools so that you don't have them in your app where you don't want them. It also makes it possible for you to only build one binary, so that you build a binary in dev, and that same binary makes the journey all the way through up production. Nobody has a chance to insert any last-minute changes because you're rebuilding the binary for every environment, right? Oh, I covered that one too. Different configs and different environments too. So it makes it a lot easier to set things up for dev and production and things, so that the apps guys or the database team or whoever is going to be in charge of your database password can change it without you having to worry about what it is, because a lot of times with compliance around, nobody can know what that is anymore except for special people, right? Deployments are controlled by different teams, and so this is also the same kind of thing, right? So you do this in dev, you do this in test, somebody deploys, it's a lot of times just your release engineer, or it might be just somebody on the dev team, or it might be your automated CI process. I don't know. But generally, upper and lower environments are managed by different teams, in which case this sort of thing is a really great place for you to help separate out your configs and make it cool. The next thing we can do that's a little scary, some people don't like to do it, and it's tough for folks who don't have a lot of trust and stability on their teams already, is dynamic discovery across tiers. So I can build an app, and then once that app is built, Apache can notice that I have a new app, and that it should probably configure some instances for that. And it can configure those to talk to the app. And then the load balancer can actually notice that Apache is configured for something and set up a load balancing pool for that. I did recently work with a client who did that, and it's really exciting when you see it happen. It can be scary because it involves trust in your tool, trust in your team, and trust in the infrastructure. And it can be a tough place to get to if you have a lot of legacy and you have a lot of siloing. But it's really awesome when you can. Try it out. What else can we do? Workstation automation. How many people here can onboard somebody in less than a week with all of the app configs that they have to do, right? I mean, you have to download this thing. Well, when I started at one client, it was you have to download this thing, but there's no way you can do it on the network here. You have to go home and download it. It was Xcode. It's a couple years ago, right? The proxy wouldn't let you do it. You have to configure RVM if you're using a Ruby environment. You have to configure Eclipse or one of the Eclipse variants if you're doing Java stuff, or a RubyMine, or all of the things that you could be using, right? And it's complicated, especially if you have both Java and Ruby-based development teams or development systems, right? So if you're doing both Java-based development, plus you have config management stuff going on, a lot of that stuff is Ruby-based, and so you have a lot of configs that have to work. And if you have somebody who hasn't used Ruby before or who hasn't used a lot of Java, these things can get really complicated. And the way I am seeing this happen with folks, there are two main tools that people are using these days. Boxin, which was written by GitHub, and that uses Puppet to do workstation provisioning. And Sprout, which was written by the Pivotal Labs guys, and that uses Chef Solo. And a lot of us have written our own stuff too. The big thing with workstation automation is that you have to stay on top of it. Otherwise, it goes stale really fast. But it is really awesome for when you are bringing people in and don't want to have to walk them through the wiki page of death, right? So it makes onboarding a faster, happier process. People aren't like just worn out by the end of their first week trying to get stuff not just downloaded and installed, but then configured and working, and following, of course, the wiki page of death, because we all have these, right? The thing that gets written and maybe gets updated once in a while, and it's 10 miles long, and most of it's stale. So I love workstation automation with my configuration management. What else? Local testing. Combined with Vagrant and your provisioner of choice, whether it's VirtualBox, EC2, VMware, these all work really well. And your favorite configuration management tool, there are others. I just didn't know what the list was. This is really awesome for testing. I mean, if you run your app inside of Eclipse or whatever, it will tell you that the app runs. But it can be deceptive. And what you get with the Vagrant combo is you actually get a provisioning system like the one you're going to use in dev and production. It will build you a nice VM with your operating system and some basic configs, and you can provision your app, you can run it, you can start it up. So I had a dev team that I was working with last year, and they spent a week in hell trying to figure out why something wouldn't work, even though it worked locally. And they came up with the brilliant deduction that it was obviously the Java patch version on the test servers that was completely throwing them off. And so we dug in, and we really looked at stuff, and we found out what it was is, of course, OS X is not case sensitive where it really matters. And they hadn't been able to catch that. And so if you had actually been testing that in a Vagrant VM with Linux, which is what a lot of this stuff deploys on, you would have been able to catch something like that. And that's really one of the things that you get over just local app testing inside your Eclipse VM or whatever. It gives you just a little bit more certainty, a little bit more looking like where you're going to go with that app than just your laptop. And a lot of this stuff, and I should say this, applies to Windows boxes too. If you're using a Windows box, you can still do all of these things. Vagrant works there. Chef works there, Puppet works there. All of these things work there. It's just that we don't talk about it as much because there are fewer. But I have worked at clients that had even splits between Macs and Windows, and I wrote workstation automation that worked for both. It can be done. The last thing we're going to talk about real quick is beefing up your pipeline. Configuration management is great for CI stability, right? So Jenkins and your configuration management of choice really makes things awesome because you can use it to do things like bootstrap instances, whether it's virtual machines, Linux containers, whatever it is, and then you have functional testing right there as part of once you've run through all of your unit tests and things pass, you can actually pop up instances and see if the app will deploy and turn on. And then you can run a functional test against it too. So you can run functional integration tests with almost all of the CM tools that I'm aware of. So we have Minitest that works with Chef, and we have Bats that works with everything. And I think there might be a Puppet Minitest. I'm not positive. But even if you don't have something that can use Minitest, there's Bats, which will run a lot of the functional tests for you after your app pops up. So, I mean, these are great things to be able to do before you get deploying for real. So that's basically what I wanted to say about that. And then I'm going to talk about next how you want to get started. What do you want to think about? I mean, if you guys are already on your way, then possibly you've already thought about all this stuff, or you already know the answers, or you've already discovered that you did it right or wrong. But I'm going to talk about it a little bit, hopefully. It's not just server provisioning, because there are so many things that you can do. You really want to think about what problem you're trying to solve, where you're going to have some impact, especially if you're trying to pilot in something like this. You want it to be impactful, or people are going to be just like, oh, your configuration management tool, that sure is sucking up a lot of your time. And that's it, right? So if you really want it to be successful, it's important to think about a few things. And the one is you need to pick a use case that works. You don't want to automate your whole world right away, right? You don't want to pick anything that's enormous. You need to pick something that is small, is achievable, measurable, so that you can say, look, this is how it used to work, this is how it works now, and impactful so that people care about it, right? So generally, people will start with operating system provisioning because it is a big win, because we have a lot of configuration drift in our operating system configs, because a lot of places are still configuring that stuff either by hand or with bad scripts that have to be fixed by hand. However, I did have a client last year who had massive instability in their Tomcat layer over Christmas, and it caused real problems for them. And so they actually looked at making their Tomcat layer more stable first by fixing the configs there with their Chef implementation. And that was really cool to see. But generally, I mean, if people ask me, I will have them start with OS stuff because it's easy, it's very straightforward. It's generally a package and a config file and maybe a service. Very straightforward. But it really, you need to find something that works for you that people are going to notice, right? So you need to stay agile and you need to stay visible with this. Again, configuration management, not sexy. I think it's a lot of fun. I think it's really interesting. But it's kind of like network engineering, right? The network engineers think it's fun, the rest of us don't. Or operating system design, right? Some people think it's fun, but I wish operating systems would just work. I don't want to mess with them. It makes me mad every time something doesn't work. So that's the thing with this stuff. You need to pick something that is going to keep you agile and visible. And you want to work small, do little things, and then change as you go. I mean, this is a lot like, you can call it agile infrastructure or whatever you want to call it, but it's very similar to a lot of the concepts that you use with agile development, which is basically you want to pick something, see how it works, be able to change it quickly if it's not right, and be able to refactor it quickly as well, because generally, the code is going to be pretty ugly the first couple times through. You want to keep an open mind. This is tough. This was really hard for me, because as we accumulate experience, we know what the right thing is to do. We just know, right? When you make a JVM, you always have the same min and max amount of memory, right? Well, you didn't 10 years ago, but it took a while to get there. And so the idea is that things that we know, we don't always know anymore. And it was tough for me to get there because I was pretty sure I knew everything of importance anyway. And the idea that there are new ways to think about this stuff that I hadn't really considered, like the idea that maybe you don't need to cram as many possible instances of JBoss onto a server because now you can make tiny VMs. And that makes configuring things a lot easier because then you don't have port conflicts and you don't have to have special port files. So you start thinking about different ways to implement things that you might not have thought before. And the trick is to really keep an open mind as far as questioning the way you do things, the way other teams do things, and to really listen if somebody questions how you're doing something. Because a lot of this stuff is new, and figuring out how to do it better is going to be helped by that a lot. And it was hard for me to get to that point. Refactoring, right? You guys know all about this. You are going to have some ugly code. I did, but I'm systems, so maybe you guys are all going to have beautiful code because you're all programmers, right? The trick is to work fast and don't get bogged down in too many details. Don't worry about making it just right. Make it work. This is a lot, again, like agile development. You want to just get stuff done and going, and then go back and refactor some things. You're going to have some ugly code. I call it my ugly baby. right? The ugly baby is right out there in the recipe or the module files, right? And then eventually what you do is you start to see patterns and you say, oh, I don't need this recipe anymore. I can actually factor this back into a library, and then you only have to write 2 or 3 lines out in the public area. And so it's just something that you need to keep in mind. Again, with the don't try to automate the whole world, you want to make sure that you can come back and refactor later. So don't get hung up on things. Brownfielding, legacy systems. Anybody here not working with legacy ever? Right, okay. Because we all hit it eventually. And you get 2 main problems with legacy. One is people, one is requirements. They're both very uncertain at this point. There is the right way to do things, and then there's the way that legacy app owners know will work. It's really important to listen to these people when they say things, because even though we know the right way to do things, if you're trying to get something done, a lot of times it's just not going to work right on legacy, because it works the way it works. And chances are the person who wrote it is long gone, and the support person is the only person who knows anything about it. So I kind of call this coloring inside the lines. We don't have a lot of freedom when we're working with legacy systems. They have to work. They generally have to continue working as we are automating them on the fly too, right? So it's touchy. And the people that you're working with tend to be very possessive. They own these apps. They understand them. They probably are really unhappy to own them most of the time too, but they still own them. And so it's their ugly baby, right? So they're going to be both possessive and defensive. And I have been on both sides of this. I have had people come at me and my apps, and I have had to come at people and try to automate stuff. I have worked with hostile ops teams who don't want anything to do with this stuff, and it can be difficult. You have to put on your empathy hat and really listen to folks when they talk to you. One of the things is that really this is an art, not a science. And one of the things that you're going to want to do is listen to what they have to say about stuff and try to get them involved in whatever it is that you're trying to do with the app. Because it's hard when somebody comes at you and wants to do stuff to your app, but if you get them up into your space, or if you go down into their space and really kind of work with them, it mitigates a lot of that defensiveness and that feeling of being pushed aside. And that really helps a lot with trying to figure this stuff out. So collaborating, it's an art, not a science, but really important for this stuff. And then, you want to be inclusive, ask questions, and listen when they tell you what will work, because while you may know what's right, it may not work. And it's very likely the truth with legacy apps, because you just never know. And you don't know what decisions went into making things when they happened either, 2, 3, 5, 10 years ago when they were made, right? Try not to be too critical. Despite the fact that the person who owns it might hate it too, it's still hard to hear criticism of stuff like that, because there's nothing you can do about it, and it's hard. So I guess that's really all I have to say about legacy systems. If people have questions and they want to talk through use cases, I'd be happy to do that after too. There's a lot of things that you could talk about that's kind of little detailish and things. The next thing I want to talk about is the things that you want in your ecosystem with your configuration management tool. Your system is more than just the sum of its parts. The tool itself really needs a lot of things to work well. It makes assumptions, and it wants things. So what isn't it? It's not a package manager. So I had one person in a chef chat be like, I did this tutorial, and I installed this package, and then I changed the package version, and now it doesn't work. Why not? And I was like, well, dude, there's no package out there for that. I mean, you have to go have the package somewhere. It's not going to work. Chef doesn't have packages. Puppet doesn't have packages. CF Engine, no packages. It just goes out and gets them, and it can abstract the actual operating system layer so that it can get packages for Ubuntu, Windows, Red Hat, whatever, right? So that's the thing. It's not a package repo. It's not a package manager. It's not a substitute for version control. It's really not. I actually don't have to tell you guys this. Some of this stuff is really obvious to developers. It was a harder learning curve for systems folks in some ways. You want package repos. You don't want your things that you get off the internet to just be stashed wherever. And this can make a whole world of other problems, partially in the kind of code that you're writing, and partially in that you are going to install something in dev, and it's going to be great. And then somebody's going to deploy your app to test and be like, it doesn't work. Why doesn't it work? And you may be on vacation. You may just be at lunch. It could take them a couple hours to get the app deployed, and the QA folks are sitting around going, we were supposed to start testing this, and now everything is behind. And it's because somebody just dumped something that they needed, a package somewhere, over on a server, where everybody who was important knew about it, but the people who were deploying stuff really didn't. And then that happens again in test, it happens in stage, and then 3 a.m. in production. It doesn't work because people keep forgetting at every step that there was this thing that they needed, right? This happens. It really does. So, I mean, I have a really long package repo rant, like I said, in my ChefConf video. You can read it or watch it or read the blog. I'm not going to belabor it. That's basically, you really need them. You want them. They're good. You want your configuration management code in version control. You must have version control. I actually still have clients ask me, should we be putting this in version control? And the answer is yes. It should be rare right next door to everything else that you are putting in version control. Please. You need to manage your build tools. Chef is great. Puppet is great. CF Engine is great. All of these things are great with build tools. They make build tools easier to use, but they don't replace them. And they're very important. So you want your Jenkins or whoever you're using to do your pipeline work. You want your binary containers, your Artifactory, your Nexus, which are also good for having custom Yum repos and things, right? And so the last thing we want to talk about real quick is virtualization. This makes everything nicer. This makes everything like sugar and ice cream. Once you have virtualization available to you, everything is so much easier. It's nice. So if you aren't using Vagrant, you should use it locally because it's really great for a lot of things. If you have VMware available to you in your infrastructure, you should use it. If it's out there and it's very difficult to get your hands on, start a crusade to make it easier to get at. You can watch some good presentations from the BestBuy.com team about how they implemented an OpenStack infrastructure for their dev teams. And so the dev teams have at-will pop-up VMs whenever they want them, as many as they like, pretty much. I mean, I think they have quotas, but in general, they've got what they need whenever they want it. And that turned their development cycle into something really fast comparatively. And so virtualization, you really want it as much as you can get of it. So practical configuration management. Let me see if I can get at my... So this is my... I bet you guys can't see. Oh, you can't see anything. That's no good. Let me see if I can move it. Hi. All right. Probably nobody can see that. Can you see this at all? Yeah, you guys. Great. This is a little surreal. So, Vagrant status. I don't think I killed it before the last test. Running. All right, so anybody here using Vagrant every day? It's the best thing since ice cream. It really is. I think sliced bread, way overrated, but Vagrant and ice cream, it's really awesome for a lot of stuff. So basically what I've got here is a Vagrant instance that's going to pop up, install Tomcat, and forward the port to my laptop so that I can show you Tomcat docs. It's very simple. It's all Chef and Vagrant and a little bit of Berkshelf. And I'm just going to run it here, and we'll run it in the background, because it took, the last time I ran it, it was like 403 seconds. So we have a lot of stuff to talk about while I'm going. All right, so and I'll review that once we're done. All right, testing. I got a couple of slides here that don't have a lot of good technical information because I'm running out of time. And I added these late just because I wanted to get them in here. I wanted to throw them out there just so that you know about them. Because as devs, I realize that this is probably a lot more important to you than some of the systems folks that I talk to. We're still wrapping our heads around things like unit tests. I mean, when I met unit tests, my mind was blown. And every time I have to write one, I have an existential crisis that lasts like an hour. So, I mean, they're hard, and so we don't always think about them. But you guys, this should actually make you happy to know that you can write tests for configuration management tools. We have unit testing with RSpec for the Ruby-based tools. And we have functional integration testing with Minitest and a tool called BATS, which is a bash-based test tool for functional tests that can run at the end of convergences for nodes and things. So that's really nice. It's really nice for you when you're doing local testing. So I can run a whole converge and run tests. And then later, my CI pipeline can actually pop up an instance and actually run those tests at the end of all the other tests, which is kind of cool. We also have dependency resolution. There is librarian for both Puppet and Chef, and that will go out and find modules and cookbooks that have dependencies on other modules and cookbooks and pull them all in so that you don't have to be like in the old days with Red Hat, searching the internet, going, I need this thing that needs 10 other things that need 20 other things, and I'm just going to go drink, right? I mean, I don't even know how I coped before we had decent dependency resolution. I didn't. I mean, really. We have Berkshell for Chef, which is more than dependency resolution, but that was its main goal in life when it first started. So I don't want to belabor this stuff too much. There could be other things. I don't know as much about other tools and dependency resolution, really. This is the place where I really know anything. So then on to things where I actually have some code and some talks. Practical configuration management, learning primitives. One of the first things we all want to do when we do this, and I am not joking, everyone wants to do it. I wanted to do it. You can find a discussion message, a message on the discussion board for Chef in 2010 where I was like, I want to do this thing. And they're like, no, you don't want to do this thing. And I was like, no, really, I want to do it. And they're like, no, you don't. And it really takes you a while to get to the point where you don't want to migrate your bash scripts verbatim into your tool. But you shouldn't, because the tool has primitives, and it's better to use those than trying to migrate bash scripts exactly. So just like programming, I mean, this is just another higher level of DSL, right? So you've got files, users, packages, directories, templates. Chef has a Git resource. It's got a deploy resource. It's got a resource for just about everything. Puppet has, the one that I always think of, they have a Nagios type. So Chef is called resources, Puppet is called types, and Puppet has some interesting ones that Chef doesn't have. I think it's just because Puppet's been around longer and it has some really interesting stuff that we haven't gotten to yet, right? So and the one I always think of is the Nagios type for them. So these are primitives. They have built-in idempotence, right? So if I install a package, if I set up a file, if I have a checksum with that file, Chef knows. Chef will checksum the file when it installs it and knows the next time whether or not that's changed. And it will overwrite it if it's supposed to. So the primitives, they're good to use because of the built-in idempotence and readability. And operating system cross-functionality, right? So let me go one more page here, right? Bash install my package. This completely subverts any kind of cross-functionality, right? So exec blocks, and I don't know this for sure, but I'm guessing that as programmers, you think that shelling out is probably the last thing you want to do. It should be a last resort. It should always be a last resort with your configuration management tool as well, because you subvert any kind of cross-functionality, and you no longer have built-in idempotence because bash blocks can't. You have to write your own checks. And if you're doing that, you might as well write bash scripts, right? So this is a bash block. It makes me sad, because now I can only install this package on Red Hat or Red Hat variants that have yum, and that's it, right? So instead, we can have this, and it would install that package anywhere at all that Chef knew about Apache packages, which is just about every Linux variant we have, and Windows, right? So, all right, I think I got that big enough. Right? This is an actual script that I intercepted from a dev team. And I was like, no, you can't use this. let me help you with that. Is there a laser pointer up here? Nope, that's okay. No big deal. The big deal here is that this doesn't have any built-in checks. You see how it downloads something and then removes it later? That means it's going to download it and remove it every time the client runs. Every time. It's going to untar it every time the client runs. It's going to install it every time, every 30 minutes, which is the default, I think, for both Chef and Puppet, right? I mean, you just don't want to do this because why? You don't want to do it for so many reasons, right? So instead, if you have this and a package repo and an ability to make your own RPM or deb, that's all you need. You don't even have to use the built-in Red Hat Tomcat package that thinks you need 77 other packages to install with it, right? You can make your own package, put it in your custom repo, and that's all you need, instead of that, whatever that monstrosity, that goes out and gets it from somewhere, downloads it, untars it, deletes some extra directories out of the Tomcat stuff. I mean, really, right? Templates. Templates are awesome. Templates can take code. Basically, they use, with the ones that I've worked with, Ruby and Chef mostly, they use Erebus type code inside them. And it allows you to lay down flat files across all your environments and different kinds of servers and have custom configs in every single one. And it's kind of cool. So this is just a snippet to show you what custom code inside a template looks like. It's just a piece of the sudoers file. Nothing terribly exciting. It just iterates over a user's collection and sets them down in the file. But it's kind of cool, because you can have different users in different environments, right? So then, this is kind of a why you want to use templates piece here. I wrote this in 2010. This is a piece from a Kickstart that I was that I was deconstructing, basically. It's a piece of something for SSH configs. And that's how it was set up in the Kickstart file, and I didn't know any better. And this is part of what I was trying to ask on the Chef forum how to do. And they were like, no, you don't want to do this. You want to own the file. And I was like, yeah, but no, I do. I want to set things. And they were like, no, you don't, because with configuration management tools, you own the file. The file does not own you. We no longer make bits of changes to files. The configuration management tool owns that file. And we want to be able to do something readable and idempotent, right? So this is what it should really look like. Can you see that okay? We got a package declaration where it installs things. It's got the service definition where it says it should be enabled on startup, so that's the check config. And then it should be running. And then we have a template with configs that we configure in the tool. And we manage that in the tool. And we check it into version control where everyone can see it. And if we have configs that are different across environments, so if you have something more restrictive in production, that can be cared for in the tool and in version control so that everybody can see how SSH is configured everywhere for anything, which is kind of cool. You should extend and abstract everything, right? Learn to abstract things. And then a bonus slide where I wrote this really great Ruby code, and it was a great learning experience, but it shouldn't be out in your recipes or modules. You should be able to extract it back. And then here. There. Sorry.
I think we've got time for maybe one question. So you get to pick which question you can answer in 30 seconds.
Anywhere you can hold down long enough to version your configuration, so everywhere.
Which question can we answer?
Oh, that was the first one. How and when should be version control? Everywhere you can get it to sit still long enough to version control it.
Okay.
The second, what's a good way to handle shared configuration modules across the entire organization is a whole talk. And I would advise you to go out and watch Jamie Windsor's Berkshelf talk as a starting point.
Yeah, Librarian and Berkshelf are a good place to start, aren't they?
Yeah.
Okay.
I can stick around too if people want to talk.
Well, so unfortunately, we have to use the big room for the last session of the day.
I can stick around outside.
Yeah. So Sascha's going to be here outside. If you provide her with beer, she'll stay around for longer. So I just want to say thank you very much to Sascha.